Greetings and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion on planning for the end of 2020. My name is Carolyn Chapman. I'm the Executive Director of Advancement for the College of Arts and Sciences at Ohio State University. I'm coming to you live from my home where we have been stationed since March and are happy to have you with us here today. I'm a graduate of Indiana University, but a passionate Buckeye. Having worked at Ohio State for almost 15 years, I truly appreciate the impact of our research and teaching on a daily basis. This has certainly been a year of change for all of us. Personally, I've never been more acutely aware of the power of research, the need to communicate clearly and think critically. Our world is growing more complex every day, and your help to help provide a solid educational foundation has never been more pressing. Thank you for being here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that we are happy to answer any questions that come up along the way. You can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mr. John Woods. John is the Assistant Vice President for Estate and Gift Planning here at Ohio State. Prior to joining us in 2015, he was Vice President of Gift Planning at the University of Arizona Foundation for 21 years. Before U of A, he worked at the law firm Dickerson & Nichols in Tucson. John has an undergraduate degree in speech communication from the University of Arizona and also a law degree from Creighton University. So John, welcome. Thanks for joining us today, and we're excited to learn a little bit more about your office.
Thank you. I'll tell you a little bit about what our office does. We oversee all the charitable estate planning for the university. So we help our alumni and friends who want to make gifts to the university, either through their estate or through some complex giving vehicles. We work with them and their advisors, their attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors, to make the most tax advantageous gift to Ohio State. So we stay busy and we're a resource to all our alumni and donors to the university.
Well, good. I know that we had a couple of pieces of legislation passed this year. Would you mind talking a little bit about the Secures Act?
Yeah, so we had one piece of legislation that it passed at the very end of 2019, and it was called the Secure Act. And most people forget that even kind of took place this year because of what we went into with COVID. But what that was really dealing with was retirement planning and IRAs. So some of the key takeaways from that is that normally or before 2020, this year, you had to start taking your required minimum distributions at 70 and a half. They raised it to 72. So it gives people a little more time to grow their IRAs if they don't need to start making distributions. One big piece that came out of it, it was somewhat of a negative for people, is they discontinued the stretch IRA. So what that was is when somebody passed on and they gave their IRA, say, to a child, they could take it out during their lifetime. Well, the IRS and Congress decided this year that going forward, you had to start taking it out within 10 years. So that entire amount had to be taken out in 10 years. And that could cause some tax stress on people because it puts them in a higher tax bracket. That was a big deal there. There were a couple exceptions for a spouse, for somebody who's maybe less than 10 years younger and a minor children, or somebody who has a disability or chronically ill, they have a longer time to take it out. But that is really something that most people are going to be concerned with, that there's no longer a stretch IRA.
Are there any creative solutions to that?
Yeah, there are actually. One way you can actually make a stretch IRA is if you have charitable intent. You can actually do a testamentary charitable trust. And what that does is the money from the IRA goes into the charitable trust. It pays income to the recipient for the rest of their life, and then it goes to the charity. So there's a way to get around that by utilizing charitable remainder trusts or charitable gift annuities, but you have to have a charitable intent. So if you have charitable intent, this could be a great opportunity if you're giving money through your IRA to a child or somebody who's not a spouse.
Good, thanks. Have people still been utilizing the IRA charitable rollover, even though the required distribution has been raised and the age for that has been raised?
Yeah, well, we still are seeing that. So there was a great provision put into law about a decade ago permanently that allowed somebody who was 70 and a half to make a gift directly to charity of up to $100,000 and not pay income tax on it. Great way once you're a 70 and a half to make charitable gifts. You don't get a charitable deduction, but you're not taxed on it. People are still doing that. Even though it's raised to 72, you can do it at 70 and a half. So a lot of people have a lot of their assets in IRA, and that may be the best asset for them to give. We've seen a little bit of a downturn this year, but we'll probably see that pick up again next year.
Would you mind telling us a little bit more about the CARES Act?
Yeah, so the new act that came out this year was because of the coronavirus and COVID, and it's called the CARES Act. And what the CARES Act did was a lot you heard about with unemployment benefits being extended. There was some stimulus money, but there were some charitable portions to it that people don't know about. So the big piece for those who were taking the required minimum distributions is you didn't have to this year. So if you took it, you were allowed to roll it back in. There was a deadline about a month ago that you had to roll it back in by that point, but you did not have to take it. You could still utilize the IRA rollover this year if you wanted to, but you are not required to take your minimum required minimum distribution. They also had, for those who do not itemize, this year you got a above the line deduction of $300 per tax return. So if it was a couple, you could only get $300 you can give to charity and write that off as a charitable deduction. The big piece this year was if you give cash gifts to charity, you can deduct up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. So in normal years, you can only deduct up to 50 to 60%. So if you had adjusted gross income of $100,000 and you made a gift to charity of $100,000, normally you can only deduct either 50 or 60% of that. This year, you can deduct the entire amount 100%. So it is a great way, if you are making that large gift, to utilize that if you are making a cash gift. So good way to do it this year. Anything that you have over that amount, you can carry over into the next year and up to 5 additional years.
Right. With lower interest rates on savings and CDs, are there some opportunities for giving in there?
There are some great opportunities, and they're called the Charitable Gift Annuity, which we talked a little bit about, in the Charitable Remainder Trust. The Charitable Gift Annuity is a fixed percentage. So if you are at a certain age, you get certain amount back for the rest of your life. It is never going to change. So the nice thing with that is you make a gift, Ohio State or a charity pays you back income for your life, and you get a charitable deduction the year you make the gift. So for example, if you are 75-year-olds, you would get 4.6% back for the rest of your life. If you're 175-year-old, you would get 5.4% back. So great way to get income back when you're only getting, say with a CD, less than 1%. So we see people putting their money into charitable gift annuities so they get that higher interest rate, guaranteed, locked, and doesn't change.
What about people who are lower in their investment dividends?
So we also saw that too with people with the dividends. You had some companies that actually started paying out less dividends. And if people are living on dividends, that made a difference. So charitable remainder trust or gift annuity could be a way to do that. And we have saw some donors to the university use this as a give us the asset that has the lower dividend and get a higher payout with the charitable gift annuity. So they're getting more income back, plus they get the charitable deduction. And at the end, it stays with the charity to be used the way they want it to be used.
One of the questions we had come in advance of this is if someone planned on making charitable gifts by the end of the year, what are the best assets they should consider giving?
So one of the best assets, the most we see is cash. So people write us a check, and that's great, but that is not the best asset to give. If you have any appreciated securities that you have held for at least 1 year, that is going to be your best asset to give, most tax efficient. So if we look at it, and I've been doing this talk for a while now, and the market has gone from being into a recession at one point, coming out of recession, we were in a bear market. I mean, we were down at one point, 30 points, 30% with stock. So far this year, the stock market is up almost 14%. So if you look at your portfolio and you see you have a stock that is very high, that is the best asset to give to a charity. If you're really tied to that stock and you don't want to give it up, give it to the charity. Keep the money, the cash you were going to actually give to the charity, and repurchase that same security. And then you are going to be able to have a higher step up in our cost basis. So when you sell it down the road, you won't have as much capital gain. So appreciated securities are by far the best thing to give to charities.
Are these, or excuse me, are these the most tax efficient ways to donate?
Yeah, they're definitely the most tax efficient. And when you're doing it, it's very simple to do. So we're happy to walk you through that, but we actually have instructions that will tell you exactly how to do it. So you give it to your broker, you tell your broker what you want to transfer. It's usually done within a day or two. We encourage people who are giving this late in the year to do it no later than December 15th, just in case there's a hiccup. But interest in doing that, we can give them actually a sheet to give to their broker and make it very, very simple to do.
Oh, great. What if someone isn't quite sure what they want to support yet? Is there a way they can make their gift now and then designate it and determine later what they want it to support?
Yeah, so there's a vehicle called the Donor Advice Fund, and you'll see those at different brokerage firms like Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard, and also at community foundations like the Columbus Foundation. And what they do is you can actually put money into a donor advice fund, get the tax deduction this year, and then you can decide later in years down the road where you want to give the money. You can give it all right away, or you can give it over numerous years. And you can put more money into the donor advice fund. This vehicle is becoming extremely popular. This is probably the most popular charitable vehicle out there right now. We have partnered Ohio State with the Columbus Foundation. So we offer our own branded donor advice fund. So with $10,000, you can start one that's managed by the Columbus Foundation. 50% has to stay somewhere on campus at Ohio State, and the other 50% of the money can go anywhere in the country to any qualifying charity. We see an uptick in those people who have an interest in leaving to Ohio State, and you're recognized as a donor right away.
Mm-hmm. Are the family foundations still popular? Is that something that's still common?
You will see people who have a lot of money. So you'll see the Bill Gates have one. You'll see people up in that level have their own private foundations, but you're seeing them not as popular as they used to be with people who are not at that same level. People are utilizing the donor advice funds more. And the reason they're utilizing them, they're easier. They're managed. You don't have to worry about the 5% payment every year. They manage them for you. So we're seeing a lot more people moving to the donor advice funds instead of private foundations.
Another question we had in advance is one of our audience members asked us how we might donate, how they might donate their family home to Ohio State. Can you talk a little bit about gifts of real estate? Are they a good idea for many people?
So gifts of real estate could be a great idea to give, because some people will have vacation homes. They may have a vacant piece of land or commercial property. As long as there's no debt on it and it is marketable, we can consider as a charity and take it. And there's different vehicles you can actually do. I was actually talking with a donor just yesterday who called and had a piece of property by Springfield, Ohio, that he was looking to actually do something with. And what you could do is you could either make an outright gift to Ohio State. So you give it to Ohio State and then we sell it and you get a charitable deduction for the appraised value. That usually takes a little time. It takes us about 45 to 60 days to assess the property to make sure there's no environmental issues, there's no survey issues, and we have no liabilities before we would take it. There's also a thing called the Charitable Remainder Trust, which you can do, which allows you to put the real estate into the charitable trust and sell it. No capital gains are due because charitable trusts are a non-entity. You then get income back for the rest of your life, 5 or 6%. So it's a good way to not avoid capital gains and also get a charitable deduction and income. There's also something called a retained life estate. That one is a good vehicle, but what you do is you give money, you give the house to the charity during your lifetime and retain a life estate in the property. And what that means is you can live there for as long as you want. for the rest of your life. You have to pay all the taxes, the maintenance, the upkeep. But once you pass on, it goes to the charity. Or if you move out, it goes to the charity. It could be a good vehicle. We're working on one right now, but it also has to be a vehicle that the person has other monies just in case they need to go to assisted living or move somewhere else, that they aren't going to rely on selling that property. But you do get a charitable deduction for that once you establish that.
What are the most common gifts that come through your office?
So the most common gift is the bequest. So the bequest is by far the easiest way to make a gift to any charity and to Ohio State. So what it is you actually leave in your estate, you say where you want the money to go to at the charity. About 90% of the gifts that we actually work on during the year are through that vehicle, through a will or living trust. And what we do is when we actually find out that a donor has an interest or an alumni has an interest in that, we will actually craft a gift agreement that states exactly how they want the money to be spent. So in their will or living trust, it may just have what the name of the fund is, and then it references that there's a gift agreement on file. That can be modified at any point. Those are revocable and non-binding. So when you're making that gift, you know if you need the money down the road or you change your mind, you can do it. So it's by far the most popular one that we deal with. And when we work with the donor or alumni who wants to do this, we give them the language for their will or trust, because we want to make sure it's exactly what they want and it's correct in the document.
That's great. John, we have another question here that we from the group, that if someone is wanting to know about living trust, can you explain how the living trust work for us, please?
Yeah, so there's a difference between a will and a living trust. And I just read an article about 20% of Americans have living trust. So a majority of people don't have that. But then again, a majority of people don't have a will either. So only 50% of the population either has a will or a living trust. So the difference between a will and a living trust is that if you have a will, you have to go through the probate process when you die. If you have a trust, you don't have to go through the process. If you are worried about privacy and people knowing what your assets were or who you're giving it to, you don't want the will, because the will is going to be a public record. A trust is completely private. If you have a trustee or successor trustee, that person is able to take over if you become incapacitated during your lifetime. So that gives you a little bit of security there, that if something happens to you and somebody needs to manage your assets, you can do it through your trust. If you have a will, you're going to have to go to court and get a conservator or a guardian. With estate taxes, though, it doesn't make a difference. I've heard people say, if I have a living trust, I don't have to pay any estate taxes if they would be due. That's not true at all. You still have estate taxes. You still have to follow that with a living trust. Currently, they're pretty high. They're at 11.4 per individual. So pretty high threshold. For those who have that issue, trust, you're still going to have to pay estate taxes. If you have a trust, though, and you have some assets outside of your trust, you still need to have a will to distribute those. So you have to be very, very careful to make sure everything is in the trust. In Ohio and most states, there's a thing called a small estate affidavit, that if your estate is below $100,000, you don't have to open a full probate. You can actually get that transferred into the trust. With IRAs, you have to have a beneficiary. It cannot be in the trust name. So you still have to have a beneficiary, but that can move directly into the trust at your death.
One final question. With the new administration, do we expect some tax changes in the coming years?
As with any new administration, you're going to expect some changes in tax laws. So when the current president was elected, he came in and wanted to make some changes to the tax law. They did pass. What his tax plan was, the taxes went down, the brackets, the estate exclusion went up, but that is all supposed to sunset in the year 2025. So those are not permanent. So President-elect Biden had some ideas of what he wants to see. So we're going to probably see some taxes increase. Now, the key here is right now, we don't know if that could pass in Congress. You have a Democratic Congress and you have currently a Republican Senate. So the Georgia Senate races are going to make a difference. If the president-elect has complete control, you may see some of these tax changes actually happen. If the Republicans stay in charge of the Senate, we're probably not going to see much. And what we're going to see, if possibly, there's always what the candidate says and what really happens may be different. But President-elect Biden has said that he would like to raise taxes on those who make $400,000 above. So it would go from 36%, the highest tax bracket, to 39.6 above that 400,000. Capital gains taxes could increase for those who are in the higher level above $400,000 in income. Corporate taxes would probably increase. They were dropped under the Trump tax cuts. They would increase up to 28%, and estate taxes would probably go down. So the threshold for estate taxes would be at a high threshold now to a lower threshold. So there's a lot of talk out there what he said he would like to do. What he actually does, we don't know yet, so we'll have to wait and see into next year what actually happens.
John, thank you. You've shared some really valuable information here today. Now would be a good time to open this up and take some questions from our audience for anyone at home who this maybe sparked a thought in your head that you'd like to have a question with John. We'll wait a few more minutes here and see if we have it.
There's always usually some questions. I've been doing this. I said, this is probably the fifth one I've done of these. And there's always some questions of somebody who it may be for somebody else or their self, but if they're, you can also get back to us at another point if you have questions and you don't want to put it in the public question and answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I think one got in there.
Yeah, but it's asking the best way to contact our office. I think we have a slide to end the program today that shares that information. It'll be coming up here shortly. John, this has been really helpful. We do appreciate your time. We do thank all of you for attending today's session. There will be a survey that automatically populates when the session ends. If you could take a few minutes to complete it, we'd be really grateful. Additionally, if there are topics you would like to learn more about, please do not hesitate to let us know. Stay well, and as always, go Bucks.